At his peak, Cliff Richard was one of the biggest stars Britain had ever seen. For decades, he was the voice of joy, the symbol of decency, the man who never seemed to fall. But in a matter of hours, everything came crashing down when he found himself at the center of the biggest scandal of his life. What followed was a devastating period that nearly broke him. He tried to rebuild and move forward, but nothing ever felt the same again. And now, at 85, unmarried, childless, and facing a heartbreaking health challenge, things aren't looking so good for the man who once dominated the entire entertainment industry. The rise of Cliff Richard. Most people describe Cliff Richard as Britain's polite answer to Elvis Presley. He has sold more than 250 million records, placed 68 singles in the British top 10, and received a knighthood from the Queen. For 6 decades, his voice has been one of the most familiar sounds in popular music. But the man who sang about joy and celebration has lived a life marked by a loneliness most people would never imagine. Cliff Richard was born on October 14, 1940, in northern British India. His father managed a catering contractor, while his mother raised Cliff alongside his 3 sisters. When Indian independence came in 1947, the family faced a choice that thousands of British families in India had to make: stay or return to a homeland most had never known. They chose to leave, boarding a ship for a 3-week voyage to Tilbury, Essex. But the England they found was not the England of postcards. There was no warm welcome, only a semi-detached house in Surrey where Cliff's grandmother took them in temporarily. From relative wealth in India, they descended into survival in post-war Britain. Eventually, the family moved to a 3-bedroom council house in Cheshunt, Hertfordshire. Cliff shared a bedroom with 2 of his 3 sisters, and money was so tight that 3 times a week, dinner consisted of nothing but hot tea and toast sprinkled with sugar. That was not a nostalgic memory, it was the only thing they could afford. Cliff attended Cheshunt Secondary Modern School, excelling at athletics and playing football for his school and eventually for Hertfordshire. But the thing that truly grabbed him was American rock and roll. His parents thought it was dreadful noise, but Cliff thought it was the future. When he was 16, his father bought him a guitar, an act of reluctant support that would prove transformative. In 1958, at Abbey Road Studios, producer Norrie Paramore invited Cliff to audition. The plan was to record an American tune called Schoolboy Crush as the A-side, with Move It tucked away on the B-side. Move It took less time and produced a sound that left no room for doubt. It reached number 2 on the UK singles chart, and British rock and roll had its first homegrown star. He would eventually make the UK singles charts in every one of its first 6 decades, a feat shared only with Elvis Presley. He would stack up 68 top 10 singles and 14 number 1s, including 4 Christmas number 1s, more than any other artist. But none of that success fixed what was quietly broken underneath. The polite smile and flawless suits covered a personal life that never found the same kind of victory. And in August 2014, everything Cliff Richard had spent decades building came down within a matter of hours. The lowest moment of his life. In August 2014, Cliff Richard was in Portugal on holiday when he turned on a television and watched police officers search his home. He had not been told the search was happening, nor had he been told why. He learned about it the same way millions of viewers did, through live coverage broadcast from a helicopter hovering above his apartment. The story began nearly 30 years earlier, in 1985, at a football stadium in Sheffield. Bramall Lane was hosting an event led by American evangelist Billy Graham. Among the crowd that day was a teenage boy who would years later make a horrifying allegation against Cliff Richard. For a public figure who had built his entire career on a clean-cut, family-friendly image, the accusation alone carried the potential to destroy everything. In July 2014, the Metropolitan Police passed information about the allegation to South Yorkshire Police. Cliff denied it immediately and consistently, but denial did not stop what happened next. South Yorkshire Police decided to search his penthouse apartment in Sunningdale, Berkshire. Before the search took place, a BBC journalist named Dan Johnson learned that the investigation existed. What happened between the police and the BBC would later be described in court as a deal. The BBC agreed to delay breaking the story about the investigation. In return, South Yorkshire police agreed to tip the BBC off about the exact timing of the raid. On the day of the raid, the BBC broadcast live footage from a helicopter that was already hovering above Cliff Richard's address. Viewers watched officers on his property. The coverage treated him, as one human rights lawyer later put it, like a bank robber or a mass murderer. The man at the center of it watched from a hotel room in Portugal, having received no advanced warning. He was thousands of miles away while his home was searched on live television. For 2 years, the investigation hung over Cliff Richard's life. He continued to deny the allegation. The Crown Prosecution Service reviewed the evidence, and on June 16, 2016, the CPS announced its decision. There was insufficient evidence to proceed with any charges. Cliff Richard was never arrested. He was never charged. The investigation closed without a single legal finding against him. But the damage was already done. The live broadcast had been seen by millions. His reputation, built over 56 years of relentless work, had been stained in a single day. In July 2018, High Court Judge Anthony Mann delivered the verdict. The BBC, he ruled, had infringed Cliff Richard's privacy rights without legal justification, and in a serious and sensationalist way. The police were also found liable. The damages awarded were substantial: £190,000 in general damages from the BBC, plus an additional £20,000 in aggravated damages. The BBC was ordered to pay 65% of the total, with South Yorkshire Police paying the remaining 35%. The police force had already agreed to pay Cliff Richard £400,000 in a separate, settled claim. Later, the BBC agreed to pay an additional £850,000 to cover his legal fees. But even those sums did not tell the full story. Cliff Richard testified that the case had cost him £3.4 million, up to that point, including lawyers and lost business. The disappearance from the public eye. Between August 2014 and June 2016, Cliff Richard lived through 22 months that he would later describe in court with a level of detail suggesting the wounds had not healed at all. The physical changes were the first thing people noticed. He lost a considerable amount of weight, not because he was trying to, but because the stress affected him. His body succumbed to shingles, a painful condition that often flares up when the immune system is under prolonged attack from anxiety and sleeplessness. The mental health deterioration was severe enough to be entered into the court record. He told the court that, at one point, he actually thought he was going to have a heart attack or a stroke. He said that sometimes he looked at his own reflection and felt like someone else, a much older version of himself, was looking back. The man who had spent decades performing for millions could barely recognize his own face. After the raid, he never lived in the Sunningdale apartment again. He used a specific word in court to explain why: contaminated. In his mind, the space where police officers had searched his belongings on live television could never again be a home. He testified that he had been burgled before, and that this experience was worse than being burgled. A burglary, at least, does not unfold on national television while you watch from another country. He became conscious that people around the world might think he was a serious criminal, and that awareness followed him everywhere. He said that every place he had ever been, he felt his name was smeared. That feeling did not leave when the Crown Prosecution Service announced there was insufficient evidence to charge him. The announcement cleared him legally, but it did not reach every person who had seen the helicopter footage or read the headlines. In the mid-2010s, he largely withdrew from the public eye. The man who had once seemed incapable of staying out of the spotlight found that the spotlight had become unbearable. Fame could no longer shield him. He believed that unless someone is formally charged, their name should not be made public. That belief, born from his own suffering, has since influenced changes in UK media law. But a legal victory does not give a man back his peace of mind. He never got those 2 years back. The damage was done. A life marked by loneliness. Cliff Richard has sold more records than almost any other British artist in history. He has headlined arenas on 5 continents. He has been a household name for 7 decades. Yet he has never walked down an aisle or heard someone call him Dad. The silence he once said he returned to after concerts was not a metaphor. Cliff has never married and has no children. For several years he has consistently stated that this was a conscious choice, not a lack of opportunity. Women have been interested. He has admitted as much. But he did not say yes to any of them. The first reason he gives is his faith. Cliff became a devout Christian in 1965, and he believes marriage requires total commitment. He confessed that he did not feel able to balance that level of commitment with the demands of a career that sent him around the world for months at a time. The second reason flows from the first. He once said that his main priority has always been music and touring, and that he did not want to drag someone else into that lifestyle. He enjoys living alone, and did not feel lonely, at least not for most of his life. The third reason is more pragmatic. He did not want to risk entering marriage only to face divorce, which conflicted with his religious beliefs. Better not to marry at all, he reasoned, than to marry and fail. But there was one woman Cliff Richard truly loved. In the 1970s, he admitted that he was in love with Olivia Newton-John. But, at the time, she was already engaged to someone else. Newton-John viewed him as a dear friend, but she married twice, including a marriage to his own best friend, Bruce Welch. Cliff Richard remained close to her for the rest of her life, and was reportedly by her side when she passed away in 2022. There were other women as well. A relationship with Australian dancer Delia Wicks, and a romance with tennis champion Sue Barker. But none of those relationships culminated in marriage or produced children. Cliff Richard later said something he had never said before. He publicly admitted that he thought he would never be loved because he chose to live a life without a family. He described coming home from the stage to silence, and he wondered whether he had missed something beautiful. He does not regret the music or the life he has lived, but there are quiet evenings, he admitted, when he wonders what it would have been like to have someone beside him, not for the spotlight, but for the silence. How Cliff Richard currently lives. In late 2024, doctors discovered prostate cancer during an insurance checkup ahead of a planned tour. He had not requested the tests. The promoter needed the paperwork to secure coverage, and the paperwork required a medical examination. But the examination revealed something that could have remained hidden until it was too late. The cancer was not very old, the doctors told him, and crucially, it had not metastasized. On December 15, 2025, he appeared on Good Morning Britain and announced that the cancer was gone at the moment. He did not say this with relief or triumph. He said it with caution, adding immediately that he did not know whether it would come back because nobody can tell those things. Then he made a plea that came from somewhere deeper than a public service announcement. People needed to get tested and get checked. The physical decline that fans have observed in recent years is not subtle. At the Brighton Centre on December 4, 2025, audience members watched carefully and later described what they saw. Cliff could not move around the stage the way he used to, and his talking voice seemed frail. But then, the same fans noted something puzzling. His singing voice is as strong as ever. Cliff has drawn a sharp distinction between stopping and retiring. The word retirement sounds final to him, like a door closing forever. But stopping is different. Stopping would mean he could absolutely change his mind anytime he wanted to. He could phone his office and ask for a couple of nights at the Royal Albert Hall. And if the hall were free, he would sing. Retiring is not in his vocabulary. Stopping is acceptable. In July 2025, a reporter asked whether his Australian tour would be a farewell. He answered with bluntness, he did not know, and he does not even think about it anymore. He added that, as he gets older, he will probably become less able to perform, but he cannot say exactly when that will happen. The thing he knows he will have to give up at some point is touring. He admitted that it is very wearing, the travel, the hotels, the nights, the time zones, and the way each flight takes a little more out of him than the one before. He completed the Can't Stop Me Now tour at the Royal Albert Hall in London in December 2025. The name of the tour was meant to be defiant, and it was. It was a statement of fact from a man who has been stopped repeatedly by scandal, by law, by age, and by cancer. A man who keeps standing up anyway, Not because standing up is easy, but because sitting down permanently is not yet necessary. He was once the most famous unmarried man in Britain, a figure of endless speculation and quiet mystery. Now he is simply an old man who lives alone, sings in public, and waits to see what his body will allow him to do next. He has sold more than 250 million records, but the streaming generation has largely moved on. The live stage is the only place left where his legend physically manifests. That is why he still climbs onto it even when his legs ache and his talking voice sounds frail. Do you think Cliff Richard should retire? Tell us in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates.